My name's David Brown. I'm an artist and a farmer in Old Saybrook. I live at the Hay House, which is made out of bales of hay, which is where I farm and do most of my art. And it's what most of my art is about. I've tried to communicate in my art that there is a limit to how much people need. At least there's a limit to how much I need. I don't have electricity, and my house is only about 10 by 20 feet inside, which I've discovered is plenty. I've got propane for cooking and the refrigerator and some lights. And I also use candles and a lot of kerosene. I've got a wood stove for heat. I feel like for exercise too, because I gotta split all my own wood. And I've got a pump in the kitchen. So, rumors to the contrary, I do have running water. It just requires a little bit of elbow grease. The house is surrounded by gardens. I pretty much can eat out of my garden. I mean, my root cellar is packed now with turnips and rutabagas and leeks and Brussels sprouts and potatoes, plus hundreds of jars of jam. Most people blow it on their gardens. They think that they end at Labor Day, and they don't. I mean, there's plenty of things like arugula and cilantro that actually do a lot better with cold weather. I always have a post-Thanksgiving Thanksgiving too for my friends, and everything in the dinner is from the garden, which also feels really cool. I think that's the way Thanksgiving should be. We have too many roosters. Roosters have to go. I always used to just give them to Ecuadorian friends and Brazilian friends, and they said, boy, that's the only chicken in America that tastes the way chicken's supposed to taste. This year I decided to keep some of them for myself, since I have somebody who knows how to do the dirty work. It always bothers me, the Tibetans are, you know, these Buddhists, they can't kill anything, but they love to eat meat. They just find somebody else to kill it. And I thought, well, that's kind of hypocritical, but here I am doing the same thing. I figured out how to grow tobacco, but I haven't figured out the picking, curing part of it. So it used to taste a little green, and it didn't have the, I guess, the nicotine kick that I wanted. But now it's really not bad. Plus I know where it came from, no additives. I don't advertise to teenagers, you know, no bad karma, it's just for me. Oh, and I share the hay house with 3 dogs who are all part of the same family. Sometimes 10 dogs if one of them is having puppies. 3 cats, and a lot of chickens. Well, I don't share the hay house with the chickens. They have their own little house out here. And they're the nitrogen source for the entire garden, and they give me great eggs. And one of these days I'm gonna paint them. So far I've only painted them dead because that's when they hold still the best, but I'm gonna start working on trying to catch them alive now too. I sort of forget I live in Old Saybrook here. I'm somewhere else. I lived in a village called the Village of Happiness, really. And that had been its name for 1,000 years. And they were refugees from the Village of Happiness, but they kind of picked up the whole place and moved it over the border. And it's people, a bunch of grinning idiots living in little tiny rooms with no electricity, plumbing, roads. And I mean, and they were genuinely happy. It took me months to get over I kept thinking, man, are they suppressing or what? I mean, they should just let out some of this anger they must have stored up, you know. I finally figured out they really weren't. They were just having a great time. At which point I also figured out that happiness is not a function of McMansions and 2.5 cars and all that stuff. I mean, I just think I'm the luckiest person in Connecticut to be here. But it does make you really aware of the seasons. Also when you're a farmer, man, you realize you don't make the schedule, you know. Nature just says, it's time, plant those parsnips or forget it, you know. The setup I got here, I hate it when people think I'm roughing it. compared to 90% of the world, I got it made. In fact, there was a photographer here, and he had just been in Haiti doing an article, and I was saying something like this, that, oh, this isn't so rough. And he said, oh, I know it. He said, 99% of the people in Haiti given this house with a phone, propane, a pump in the kitchen, a wood stove, and this land would figure they'd won the lottery or died and gone to heaven. I don't have a blender. I don't, praise God, have a TV, but you know, I got most of what I need. I would love to convert everyone to small. If they want electricity, fine. Although they could get away with a lot less of it and probably generate their own with solar or for what they really need it for. I mean, and I'm not anti-technology. I drive a truck, for goodness sake, you know? I have a telephone and an answering machine, and thank goodness. So I'm not trying to convert anyone, but I think this is enough room for me anyway. And if you just multiplied that by the number of people in a family, this is one of my solutions, which isn't really mine, for solving half of America's problems. If people first disassemble their television with the brick, and then put all the time that they normally put into their television, which is 4 to 5 hours a day per person, into gardening. First of all, can you imagine how much more physically healthy they would be, how much better fed they would be, the energy we would save not schlepping food from Florida and California? And somehow, if I can communicate that with my art, it would be nice. I'm trying to integrate the two of them. You know, your art is your life, your art is your life. So the Hay House installation is the piece I've been working on for the last almost 5 years. It came in stages, even though I think it was all there as a whole at some point. I thought at one point that it would be neat to paint a still life of the inside of my house, because I think everything in my house is beautiful. I've kind of removed all the plastic, and there's wooden Tibetan objects and woven things and baskets. And I had so many artist friends who asked if they could paint in the Hay House that I thought, well, you know, I should be painting in the Hay House too. And a number of people said, you know, your whole house is a still life, which gave me the idea. I had one of those light bulbs go off in my head. I said, well, you know, my whole house is a still life. And wouldn't it be neat if I did a big still life of my whole house? Which then meant I had to figure out how to do this 10 by 20 foot giant still life of my house, which took me a few months because I don't think spatially. I'd been working on that for a couple months before I said, now what am I going to do about the outside of this big hunk of plywood? Then I realized, whoa, if I'm going to paint the inside, I can have paintings on the outside. And then I got the idea of, since there were 4 sides of doing the 4 seasons, and at the time I was working on a piece, A Year of Sunrises. I got up one morning in March, determined to paint the sunrise. I'd been reading biographies of Impressionist painters, and it seemed like everybody was always waking up at 3 in the morning, usually in large groups, to run out and paint the sunrise. And I decided I had to get up and see what it was all about. So it happened to be St. Patrick's Day, which was just luck. But I did get up and I painted the sunrise, and it just got me so high that driving back I said, you know, I'm going to do that every morning for a year. So I started doing it. When you do the sunrise, you only have a half an hour. If you start too early, it's too dark to see, and if you do it too long, you go blind. In fact, I almost had that problem the first month I was doing it. As long as I got to the river or out into my field, before the sun came up over the horizon, I thought, oh, well, great, I'll do the sunrise. And then I would proceed to sit there and watch the sun come up and paint it way up in the sky somewhere. And then about 2 or 3 weeks into that, I realized I was seeing black spots during the day, which were, man, I was burning little holes in my rods and cones or something. And in fact, that also tied in with reading the biographies of the Impressionists, because they all went blind by the time they were 70. You know, Monet wore these, what are they called? Smoked glasses, like Coke bottles. In fact, that's why he painted, I think that's part of the reason he painted giant water lily canvases, because he couldn't see detail anymore. He could just see the big picture. So I thought, well, that's fine for Monet, but I don't really want to go blind. So I learned that you had to be there a half hour early and be done just as the sun came up over the horizon. And it was one of those things that was, it seemed like the normal thing for me to do, but I think it was just wacko enough that it got some attention for the whole Hay House project. If you were to see the installation, you would think that somebody created their little ideal fantasy world. The best review was pretty much the only review that the show got. The writer wrote a great review, and she loved the piece. And she wrote, "You have to wonder if it's really as beautiful in real life as what he paints." So I managed to get her number and call her and say, come and see it, it's better. And she did come and see it, and she said, you're right, it's better. So it just needs to get to the Brooklyn Museum, which is where I think it should be. Somebody from the Brooklyn Museum has to break down on 95 and walk up here looking for help, something, I don't know, to get them here and say, yeah, this is pretty cool. The final part of the original Hay House installation was this piece called the Community Mandala, which grew out of another big grid of portraits that I did called American Sangha. And I just had this idea about everyday heroes and the importance of people's labels. So I painted 20 portraits of friends wearing t-shirts with their label on the front of it, whatever it happened to be. Doctor, dentist, firefighter, and it gave the human element to the whole piece, because I really think that it's those people that enable the Hay House to exist and inspire it. And it also stylistically gave this big round gold sun element to the installation, which has a geographical sacred space element to it, sort of feng shui, different directions being different times of the day and seasons, and so that rounded that all out. This is the Daffodil Brunch. I've lost track of what number, maybe the 12th annual. It started with fewer daffodils and fewer people, and has grown into this. I don't know how many people, a few hundred, to match the increased number of daffodils. And it's just a way to share the daffodils in the garden and get lots of great food here at one time, and lots of great people here at one time.
Tibetans are gonna lead us. It's just a few words, and then you're gonna say 3 times Laigilo, which means may the gods conquer, and each time you throw a third of it in the air, and the last time just let it rip. Okay. Laigilo.
And this piece that I'm working on right now is part of a year of weeks of dawns and dusks. Painting the sunrise was like too much time pressure, and there was one view of the garden that I had done on a really large scale for the Hay House installation, and a number of people liked it enough that they asked me to do other versions in other sizes for them. And then I decided it would be great, since the scene was already changing, it would be really nice to do that same scene every week for a year. And then I decided, well, since I'm gonna do that, I might as well also do this scene across the field, because I love the way the sun hits the trees on the other side of the field every afternoon, assuming the sun's out. So then I started both of them. I think really good writers, people make themselves sit down at a certain time every day and write or paint. And I also like the changes. I mean, I learn a lot about how the sun moves, how the light changes, how the garden comes up and disappears. I mean, it's also kind of a neat record of a perennial garden. You know, these flowers come and go, and these come, and what I'd like to do is just paint right through the season, each week, find whatever is happening, the foxglove or the monkshood or the peonies, and just paint that part of the garden. I never have time to paint in the summer, and then when I finally have time to paint, I'm looking at brown. I mean, I keep hoping it'll snow a lot, because snow is definitely prettier. And actually, I'm into week 47 now, and man, if I had known in week 1 what this entailed, I probably would have had somebody smack me and tell me to stop it. I have to be here every day for a year, twice a day. I think the 12th will be the last day of the 52nd week, but I kind of want to do one more week just to have the cycle start again. Although I may just have a positive nervous breakdown on January 12th and decide that that's it. The one across the field is more, I kind of like it better. It's just the field and the light swinging back and forth in the course of the year, and the grass coming up and getting mowed and coming up again. And maybe if I had just done the morning or the evening, but doing both of them, I can't go anywhere. I've just got to be here. I was the flipbook king in 7th and 8th grade. My art teacher fell in love with me. She planned a home movie. It never quite happened, but I would love to know where they are. My mother, we discovered when she died, had saved all of my younger sister's artwork. Didn't save any of my artwork. I would love to know where all those things are. Oh, I'm starting to make things be in the picture. We mowed the field a month ago and raked up the hay and had to drop it somewhere. I made sure I sat down in my chair to make sure it would be in the middle of the picture because I needed something new. This'll all, I think, fit nicely into the Hay House installation. In fact, I realized it was the missing piece. I would love to have a monitor at the east end and the west end of the house, but have it running, just dissolving from one to the next, because I think it's going to be really cool. The message of the Hay House installation is this is more than enough. And I actually included one piece of text in the whole piece. In the interior, if you happen to look in just the right place, it said this is more than enough. And I think people didn't necessarily physically see that because you really had to be paying attention to find it. But I think a lot of people got that that's what it was about, that it was more than enough. Overall, my work is about appreciating the moment. In fact, ever since September 11th, I've really been feeling, if there's one thing we should all figure out, it's that we should appreciate peace, which, having traveled in other parts of the world, I realize that's not the given that most Americans think it is. And I get to sit out here and look at this gorgeous field every afternoon, which I think is pretty cool. And that's enough.